Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. I'm your host Moose, and this is my producer Nick. Our main discussion is about Islam in the 21st century. However, we will critique other religions and ideologies. We condemn any form of discrimination, violence, misogyny, slavery. We do, however, embrace many perspectives and free speech if it is factual and correct, and not based on any hate. Throughout the show, we will be exploring different religious beliefs, practices, and their impact on society, ranging from politics, interpersonal relationships, and mental health of believers and non-believers. We hope to create an open dialogue for those who feel they're not heard, especially those who have doubts and have left their belief systems. If you are interested in exploring the complex topic of religion and wish to be part of an honest and open dialogue, this is the show for you. We also welcome feedback and discussion from our audience and listeners. The Gin and Tonic Show is a free speech platform where you can express your ideas without any fear of violence and repercussions or any consequences. Please do join our discussion in the live chat as well as the comments. Thank you for stopping by and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of the Gin and Tonic Show. Today, I have Cultured Ginny joining us.
Hello. I'm here to be I wouldn't say the devil's advocate, I would say Iblis's advocate, but I'm here to be the nice voice. Whereas Mr. Satan here is going to be the accuser, the not so nice voice, with the subject that we are going to discuss today. And that subject is
Ali Dawah.
Of course.
And answering the toughest atheism questions. Yeah, I personally have no hope that Ali Dawah will steelman any of the atheist points because he doesn't even understand Islamic points properly. So we have a long discussion on this going. So, Cultured Ginny, would you like us to start the video?
Yes. Let's the execution begin. I say execution because it's going to be an intellectual execution here.
Of us, yeah.
So, who created God?
You believe in God. So scientists couldn't figure it out, but you could. Is that right?
If there is infinite time,
yeah,
why not infinite possibilities?
The moment he creates that, he becomes not powerful because he can't lift it. There's no such thing that exists. There was a study done in Oxford University by Justin Barrett. He found that young kids who are not taught about Islam or Christianity or any other religion, they all had the inclination to believe in one God.
Ali Dawah, you have 1 minute for each question.
You ready?
Are you ready?
Can you prove
No, we are not.
God's existence in 1 minute?
Let's look at Google. In order for Google to exist, we need the internet. In order for the internet to exist, we need the computer or our telephones or our tablets. In order for the computer to exist, there has to be human beings that create it, and etc. It relies on electricity. The question follows as the following. Google relies on the internet relies on the computer relies on us and electricity, and this goes on. We cannot have an infinite regress of dependent things. We require a place where it all stops and makes sense, which is the independent, self-sufficient, necessary being, which is God.
Why can't
So to that question,
Maybe continue.
Yeah.
Continue. Let him finish his argument.
for sure.
the necessary being be the universe?
Well, that's good that you say that, because first it shows that you acknowledge with me that we require a necessary being. That's good. All you've done is applied this to the universe. And we say that contradicts the necessary being, because the necessary being is independent, self-sufficient, and is necessary. The universe is not self-sufficient and dependent. It's opposite. So you can't have this be that, because it contradicts.
So to that, I would ask, why can't it be Shiva? Why does it have to be Allah? That's that.
Yes, I would actually go on that subject too. My argument here would be that it's actually not does not have to be self self-dependent. It doesn't need to be independent. You could have a longer regression, even if it isn't infinite. And by the way, he does not clarify why an infinite regression isn't possible here either. It is, after all, a possibility we could imagine. After
Why?
all,
Yeah.
after all, he still actually deals implicitly with infinite possibilities. He actually deals with infinite possibilities because God is infinitely powerful, infinitely knowing. His God is infinite, so he actually allows the concept of infinite, existence. So, with just that acceptance, an infinite regression should be possible too. But let's put that aside and say that we do not accept an infinite regression with, one created the next, and the next created that one, and the last back. The only thing the universe needs, if we do not accept infinite regression, which I do not personally do either. So I'm actually kind of on his side on this point. But if we do accept that there is no infinite regression, everything that is needed to start the universe is something that is eternal and outside of the universe, that is not dependent on the universe, but the universe comes from it. It doesn't need to be a thinking deity. It could be a law of existence, that existence is brought forth automatically when there is no existence. This is a law that is outside of the universe, or at least not that acts on a higher meta level on which the universe is dependent. It doesn't need to be a thinking deity. It just needs to have the ability to generate the universe. Notice I say generate, because it does not have to have an intention either. It could just be that it generates. And furthermore, when he discusses God, because he kind of goes in how Google depends on the internet and how everything of these things are creations of ultimately of mankind, kind of like how the universe is a creation because it works so perfectly. I mean, the issue is that we only have the universe where we work in. This principle could have generated several, almost or even an infinite amount of universes, or a near infinite amount of universes that we would not know about. We only know about this universe that we are in because it just happened to generate a universe at this time where we actually function as thinking beings due to pure random chance playing out over several iterations until that was the case. So there are a lot of arguments you could make against his arguments here.
Definitely. And yeah, the next question is going to be an interesting question here.
Can God create a rock that he can't lift?
I mean, this is an invalid question. When people ask this question, it's like a valid question. I can ask the question, can God cease to exist? Of course not. It's contradictory. It's like me saying, how many days in a week? Yes or no? Yes or no? It's not a yes or no question. I have to ask how many days of a week? 7. So the point is the question is invalid. So to say, can God create a rock so big that he can't lift? Then the moment he creates that, he becomes not powerful because he can't lift it. There's no such thing that exists. It's just a question that is asked.
Stop here. The question is actually not a type of a logically fallacious question that implies something that is impossible with regards to this. So the problem isn't in the question, but you could actually argue from Islamic theological traditions, which he does not, especially from the Maturidi tradition, that God, the definition of all-powerful, is being able to do all actions that are not self-contradictory and impossible, because all-powerfulness does have in certain respects limits. But what we are discussing here is the total unlimited definition of all-powerfulness, which is, in that case, the question, can he create a stone he can't lift? Because if he can create it that he can't lift, then he isn't all-powerful. But because he can't lift it and he does not have the power. But if he can't create that, then he is not all-powerful by that definition. But you could simply say that would be contradictory. And that is not the definition of all-powerful as ought to be applied to God. Because God, even if he is unlimited in regards to limitations of the universe, he still is subject to rules of coherence.
To the physical laws in that sense, right? He would have to use.
It's not a physical law, it's rather a law of coherence. It's even more of a meta level.
For sure, because I was thinking then, because at this point he would have to define the term deity, or deity or God, because this would be a general. Which definition of God are they using? Are they using the Abrahamic definition of God or another pagan definition?
I'm discussing the Abrahamic, the Islamic conceptualization. I'm just saying that there are traditions within Islam that could have answered this much, much better than Ali Dawah did here.
Yeah.
Because the fact of the matter is that God's definition of all-powerful must be defined here in order that we can discuss what is a contradiction or if it is possible or not. If we take the maximalist approach that all-powerful means he can do absolutely anything, disregarding, contradictions, then he will get contradictory and logic will say that this can't actually exist. This logic will be contradictory because you can't create, the unliftable rock, or there is a lot of other examples of this as well with all powerfulness and contradiction. But if we instead allow the much smaller definition of all powerful, the more stricter, more limited one, in that all powerful is the ability to do all possibilities rather than being able to make everything possible. Do you understand the difference?
Yeah,
I think a better argument would be that all powerful is being able to do all possibilities rather than to be able to make everything possible. And there are traditions that argue for this sort of version of God within Islam, and thus this question wouldn't work against them. But in this case, since Ali Dawah only says the question is invalid, which it isn't, it's actually a valid question with regard to his conceptualization of God here. But so the question isn't a problem here. The problem here is his conceptualization of God. But it's not necessarily a problem with the entirety of Islam either, because there are traditions where the conceptualization of God does not have these problems. But Ali Dawah, now has to face.
For sure. Let's hear, because for me at least, I was thinking because in terms of a deity that's from a pagan tradition would have his own set of responsibilities, so he wouldn't be. So that
But the
depend
issue
on
with
what.
the Abrahamic God is that he is considered all powerful. And then this is a matter of about how do you define all powerful? And that is, and thus I lean towards the often better explanation of all powerful as being able to do
Yeah.
all possibilities rather than the ability to make everything possible.
For sure. All right, let's see what his next question is.
For the sake of it.
Can't there be more than one creator?
No, because then we go back to the argument of necessary being. If there was more than one creator, then the question is, how could you have one necessary being which is self-sufficient, independent? If there is another creator, then it's dependent. It's not necessary anymore. So the question is, if there was two creators, firstly, Allah says in the Quran, they would fight each other for power. Yeah. So that shows two powers fighting each other are dependent because they require more power to kill the other one. So that's why we believe there has to be one necessary being that is self-sufficient, independent, and necessary.
God created everything.
Yeah. What would you say to that, Jenny? I would say I would have
say
a.
that. I mean, it's not about the gods fighting each other. That's an entirely, extrapolation that, because there are two gods, they would, immediately fight each other. This isn't even a good argument against the regression or the multiplicity of gods that traditional theologians have made, both within, Islam and in Christianity and Judaism. This is actually, the argument here is that you have a hierarchy of dependence, and the hierarchy will always have a dependence that ends up with one. Because if you have several codependents, then you will get the issue of an infinite regression. And then you get into these implications of infinite regression and the problems of logic regarding them.
Yeah, no, for me, I was thinking again as well. He's trying to define what a monotheistic God is.
Yeah, I mean,
but he doesn't make that definition clear. I know there's like a time restraint on it, but it's one of those things where he has to start from
yes, and we should be aware that he has a time restraint, but he could simply have said that because the multiplicity of several creations creates codependence, and you need to go back to one original source of everything, unless you create an infinite regression. Especially infinite regressions of possibility of interaction between these deities. Because if we have two equally, all-powerful, original, pre-universe entities, then you also get questions if they act outside of time about who created it, if they did it at the same time, or if they act outside of time, both of the same, in an happening that isn't even within time. You get very weird types of infinite regressions and happenings here if you go into this.
Just to say hi, Jen. Hi there, Jay. Kerrigan, and I do agree with you. He is a donut, but I love the. You know what? Moose isn't here to stop me. He is a donut.
I wouldn't go so far. I don't want to be mean towards people that, even if they make bad arguments, it's better to just be respectful.
Oh, he's not donut because
Even if I will argue against him in frustration at times, and argue that he is actually not doing that good of a job of being an Islamic apologist.
for
You
me,
know,
I don't
it's
mind people who are religious or religious apologists because I talk to Shabir Ali and other people, but this guy's a pedophile advocate in certain senses, and then repeatedly threatens atheists, right? So it's not about like I don't mind like attacking him like because of that. All right, let's continue.
yeah.
So,
Continue.
who created God?
Well, the question is invalid. Once again, it's an invalid question. Just because somebody asks this question doesn't mean it's a valid question. Because what we say is we see cause and effect within our universe. It requires a designer. To come and say who created that designer is you haven't understood who the designer is.
This might be a watchmaker kind of
Yes,
argument.
but I actually touched upon it a little bit before when I talked about the infinite regression. That is a much firmer argument against this question about who created God, because you do get into an infinite regression here if we do ask that, because then you ask about the next one and the next one and the next one, and it will just continue. But I will also say, just because the universe is created like a watch, I would also argue here against that view, because the universe might not be created like a watch, and even a watch or any sort of thing that is created within quotation marks by humanity might just be the result of processes that are greater than our own existence and free will. We might not even have free will. We might in fact just have made things due to the various laws of the universe interacting, and due to deterministic factors leading us to, for example, making a watch or discussing this video. We might not even have free will. So everything could just be the result of various rules of the universe interacting. And all of these rules go back to an original source rule or source from which everything stems from. And that thing that it stems from does not even have to be thinking itself either with a free will, or be anything like a, anthropomorphic god that is kind of thinking with his own will and has his own demands. It could just be a rule, like gravity or anything that caused the universe.
Yeah, let's see what he has to say to finish.
Yes.
Is. It goes back to the issue of the necessary being. What's the attribute? It's independent. It is self-sufficient. It is necessary. If you acknowledge these attributes, these three things, yeah, you need to acknowledge that the question of who created God, can God make a rock so big he can't lift, can God cease to exist, are questions that are not valid. It doesn't exist. The question you're asking, there's no such thing. Because if there was a God that created him,
I mean, I accepted those three terms, and I argued for several things here that contradicts his, ideal deity. So you can accept these terms, and I would even say that you ought to accept them due to various arguments for it. But that does not mean that you're dealing with a thinking deity, that you're dealing with a thinking God.
Yeah. For this, like again, like I would say that the question itself, like you mentioned, is a valid point or valid question. It's just in a he hasn't. We don't have his preconceived definitions of what the deity that he's talking about, so it will be hard to know from his perspective to decipher that, at least for me.
then he becomes dependent now. He's not self-sufficient anymore. So what we say is that this creator, as long as this necessary being is independent, is self-sufficient, is necessary, everything stops there.
Why Islam when there is many other religions?
Well, that's a question I asked myself before I came to Islam. Why Islam? And when I did my research and what I was born with the fitrah, there was a study done in Oxford University by Justin Barrett. He found that young kids who are not taught about Islam or Christianity or any other religion, they all had the inclination to believe in one God, not two, not three.
Stop.
So to me, I had
Stop. There is I don't know which study he has studied, but I do know studies on religious psychology and studies that have been done on feral children. What is said there isn't that they have an inclination to believe in one God. They have an inclination to believe in various things that would be described as religious. Sometimes it would be almost spirits. Usually it's animism, the belief in that things have spirits. That is also a very common thing in tribal religions and religions that are from societies that aren't even Neolithic or agricultural, that are still on the hunter-gatherer stage of cultural development. Or it's pretty bad to talk about societies as being on stages of development, but so I'm talking about societies here that haven't utilized agriculture, that are still in hunter-gatherer situations. They usually have animist beliefs, and this seems to be the more. It's also very hard to speak about a default religious state because people differ a lot. Also, these groups differ a lot from each other too. So you can see a lot that there are a lot of different religious experiences and ideas that develop if you do not enforce one certain belief.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. It's going to be hard to find someone who hasn't heard about the thing, because when someone hears God as a child, God is being a singular kind of concept. That's probably where because I don't know how good of a comparison this would be, but I always think about Lord of the Flies, where they deify the kid. When they say God, they deify the pig's head almost. So when you ask that kid about one God, or just say, what do you think about God? He's not going to have the complexity of thought to say multiple gods or deities or whatnot if he hasn't been exposed to multiple religions. Would be my point for that.
Yeah.
had that in myself to believe in one God. But the question was, why Islam? I asked the same question to myself. And when I looked into it, I realized true monotheism in its true sense. Because if you go to the Christians, they say we're monotheists and they believe 3 in 1. You go to the Hindus, they say we believe 1 million gods is one. The point is this: pure monotheism in its worship and understanding of who God is only in Islam. Not only that, also when it comes to the Quran, it is the only scripture on this planet that is being preserved and has miracles that we can see. For example, if I go to a Christian and I say, look, I want to believe in...
Stop. That just presupposes the acceptance of the Quranic narrative and the Islamic narrative, which makes you have a circular argumentation about this. Oh, why is the Quran preserved? Because it says so. Oh, but how do you know that it's preserved? Oh, because it says so. And then you go back into this circular argumentation. I mean, you do not actually know if the Quran of today is actually the same as was, told by Muhammad. The thing is, the verses about the Quran being preserved and the traditions about the Quran being preserved could simply have been made up as well. And also, there is also a very, very interesting thing I thought about here. If we take also the standard view of Islam that the Quran is uncreated, and also that the Quran is unchanging and perfect, and because it's the literal word of God into the universe, then you also have these very strange aspects where the Quran has divine attributes in a way, and thus it could potentially also be argued to actually undermine the divine nature of God itself, because now you have suddenly something that also has divine attributes, and that isn't only restricted to God. And this was actually an argumentation for why the Quran should be considered a creation on of man on earth by God, rather than an extension of God's direct speech in a way that was uncreated, because that leads to this sort of issue that you have several things now with divine attributes. And this was the Mu'tazila argument for saying that the Quran was created rather than uncreated.
Yeah,
Afternoon, fellas.
good
And
afternoon, Jen.
but if we accept that the Quran is not, I will go into we will say hey to Gene Wallis after I've finished my argumentation. But if you say that the Quran was created, then you also open up the thing that the Quran is no longer perfect, and thus you open up for the thing that changes could happen. But if we accept the thing that the Quran is created, like a perfect, like the perfect word of God, and thus preserved due to being the perfect word of God, then you have also introduced perfection, and perfection is an attribute only belonging to God, and thus you get polytheistic elements that could be considered shirk. Hello, Gene Wallis.
Hello. Wasn't Ali Dawah the same one that said there were no scientific miracles in the Quran? Like,
Yeah,
I
he has
swear
a
there's a
video on that.
video.
There's a video on that.
Exactly.
That was the point I was going to bring. Because both these points, Yasser Qadi actually says that there are holes in the narrative which Muhammad Hijab magically made disappear. And Ali Dawah has an entire rant where he talks about how scientific miracles don't exist, which drastic measures did his video on.
Yeah,
well.
exactly. It said it doesn't matter. Like, they don't matter if they existed or didn't exist. Like, it was true anyway. So he's funny that he's like using the same line of reasoning now. Is this interview recent?
Let me just check. This
When
was
was this?
done 2 years ago. 2 years.
Oh, okay, okay, cool.
Yeah, so he's still trying to drop the narrative, or like use the narrative to bamboozle people the same way he was bamboozled. Yeah. So I was gonna wait till he finished that, but then again, like he's trying to confuse.
By the way, I forgot to mention the Mu'tazila were a theological movement within Islam that were very active during the 8th and 9th centuries during the Abbasid period, and they were also involved in a lot of conflicts with what became traditionalist Sunni Islam. But they proposed the idea that the Quran was a creation that in certain ways could be considered imperfect.
And they're still alive, or
No, they were in the past. They were a major movement, but they died out. And the last accounts of any major Mu'tazila movements are from the 11th or 12th centuries, I think.
Yeah, and also just to bring up his point about Christianity as well. There are, I forgot the gentleman's name, but there was this scholar who was saying that the concept of the Trinity in Christianity isn't about making three gods, but more so of God. Jesus just says that he is bringing forth the command of the Father above, and not directly saying he's a child of God, but more so what God is his guardian in a sense. So yeah, there's scholars that
That
where
that was the Arianist argument about God and regarding if Jesus should be considered divine or not. Their argumentation was that God as the Father isn't this is not the same as Jesus being a divine child. It's like God is the father of Adam, in a way. Jesus is just a creation of God.
Yeah, Jesus just himself like claimed that his father was above. And yeah, the Trinity is like it's supposed to be like a unity of like three, right? So it's like three aspects, like God the Father, God the Spirit, and God the Son.
Yes, but you also had movements that
Which
were against the Trinity as well within
yeah,
Christianity.
of course.
You
Yeah,
still
yeah.
have them as well.
Right, of course. But it's Muslims believe in the Ruh of Allah, right? Which would be the spirit.
It's not this. It's not comparable to the spirit within Trinitarian Christianity, and that concept is much more interlinked with certain Sufi traditions rather than more mainstream Islamic tradition.
But it's spoken of in the Quran, though, right? Like
Yeah,
doesn't
but
he?
yes, but that's more like God's presence rather than a different entity or a different aspect.
Right, but that's what in Christianity, like that's what the Holy Spirit is supposed to be as
Yes.
well. Mm-hmm.
So in that way, and in certain interpretations, you could say that they are similar. But you could say, in Christianity, you also have this dichotomy of them being the same, but also not being themselves the same. Whereas in Islam, they are the same. They're just an attribute of God rather than an aspect of God. If that makes any sense.
yeah, that kind of makes sense for me. Because this was the same thing Moose and I have discussions about.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think it's just literally the same thing with different labels because Islam has to try to assert its God as separate from the world, and that's what they do to assert that. But in actuality, it's pretty much the same exact concept. But if that's what they need to call it to make themselves feel better, to make their God separate, then that's what it is, right?
I disagree. I will actually. The problem here is that Islam isn't one religious tradition. It's a multitude of various sectarian groups and their traditions and interpretations. But generally, within most of Sunni orthodoxy, and here I mean Athari traditions, Ash'ari, and Maturidi traditions, but also there are exceptions even within these. But within most of these traditions, of these traditional currents, God is, his spirit is just his presence. It's the same thing. He isn't part of the universe, but he is in it. Always seeing, always observant, always there.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the argument, but it's just an apologetic, right? How could you be present without being not present? Like, how could you be omnipresent without actually being present? So and I was under the impression that they didn't claim their
no,
God
no,
to
no,
be
now we,
omnipresent, right? They don't. Islam doesn't claim the tri-omni properties like Christianity does.
I mean, his presence is just his omniscience. He knows everything in that sense, and he's of everything also capable within the universe. But I mean, the thing is that when you combine those factors, it's less. See it like this: in Christianity, the spirit is an aspect. It's in a way a version of God acting within the universe.
It's
That
the
is
entity
God,
that does the bidding of God in within.
yes, and it is also God at the same time as it is a separate entity. But within Islam, it's just an attribute of God. In that it isn't separate, or it isn't distinction from the other things. It's just something we apply to something which this deity is.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, like I
There is
understand the concept, but it doesn't. When it says they blew, when Allah blew the ruh into Miriam's farj, right? He blew his spirit into her womb. So it's the same thing as the Holy Spirit. It's what does your bidding on earth. Like I get what you're trying to say within the Islamic framework, but in my opinion, they're just bullshitting because it has to be, they have to assert their God as separate from the creation, right? Or else their
the
framework falls
interpretation.
apart. But
The interpretation.
it's the same thing.
Jin Wallace, it isn't the same thing because it's interpreted differently. Though you could interpret it just to be like that, but in most traditions, it hasn't been interpreted like that. Rather, the view has been kind of like, if you take, for example, God acting and making Mary, the virgin, into a a pregnant woman. In the Christian tradition, it's the Holy Spirit doing it separately. In Islamic traditions, it's just God acting his command, making her pregnant. It's a much more direct thing.
Sure. Cool.
Let's see what Ali Dawah
I'm not
has to
I'm not
say.
saying that these traditions are right. I'm just saying that they are
That's
logically
what
and actually definitionally different. It's not me defending
yeah,
Islam.
cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah.
Best way you can put it, Jen, is one's horse shit, one's cow shit. They're both different, but they're still
That's
shit.
it, exactly. Like it's an
Yeah,
apologetic within the framework. Like they
it,
have to make their God this
yeah,
way, and they will contradict themselves and relabel things in order to make their God this way and assert their God as separate
because
from the universe when
if
in
I can explain
actuality
it,
it's impossible to do that. But I get what you're saying. I understand the issue.
yeah, if I can also explain, it's like all Christianity in that aspect is also bringing in an aspect of non-duality there as well, where for example, if I can just bring up the example in Hinduism, Parabrahma being the main energy
Hmm.
or deity, but having that prism of light split into 7 different colors to do 7 different duties.
Exactly.
God didn't physically send, in Christianity, God physically sends Gabriel to put the seed of Jesus inside Mary's womb. Whereas in uh, Islam, they're saying that level of non-duality doesn't exist. It's God Himself that did it. And at the end of the day, you can say, "Oh, but you still believe Iblis went and gave that message," kind of thing. But they say that his role was a lot different as opposed to God taking the form of Iblis. Because God
Hmm.
in Islam is formless.
Yeah, allegedly.
because
Yeah.
because it's insulting and
Let us
blasphemous
not
for
even
that
go
long.
into God sitting on the throne or having hands and the like.
Well,
from
this is
Quranic tradition.
these are the contradictions, right? And in order to himself, like God himself, to blow the spirit into Mary would have to enter the universe to do such, right? So it's all kind of just ridiculous claims that they hope people don't sit too long and think about.
Though you can change things without being in the universe. I mean, think about someone working on a computer, for example. He isn't in the computer, but he's changing program things and changing things within the computer.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. All right, let's hear what Ali Dawah has to say to finish his argument.
In Christianity, show me. You say Jesus gave life to the dead and this, that, with the permission of God. Show me. Or if you go to the Jews and say Moses did that, show me. Can they show you? No, they can't. If they come and say to us, what's the miracle of the Quran? We'll say, here's the Quran and we can show you, touch it. You can feel it, you can analyze it. Why? Because also we learn from this, the Quran is for all mankind. And you can see it, you can hear it, you can examine it. But the miracles that the other prophets done, you can never prove that. That's why that was for that time specifically. And the Quran is for all times because we have a method, an oral tradition, which is the Quran, which we and many generations after us can examine. And that's what I did before I came to Islam. I examined it, I read it, I looked at the prophecies, I looked at the miracles. I said, this can be no other than by from Allah.
That's absolutely bullshit.
Yes. There is no... I mean, the Quran... Even if you were even to take the argument that the Quran is beautiful, beauty does not equal truth or divinity either. And and the miracles inside of the Quran, the descriptions of various things, many of them aren't really miracles when you actually begin to scrutinize them. And what are considered miracles are oftentimes unsubstantiated.
And then the question would come to ask, is the Quran that's in a college prayer room that has some dumb fuck frat boy who was drunk one day draw penis on it just as beautiful as the Quran in some museum in Saudi Arabia?
Satan, do you want me to get a Moses Samsung water bottle?
Yeah. So no, I'm bringing the point.
And also get his stick because you are very close now for me to use it on you.
No, my point being, what if there's wrong translations of the Quran? What if there's Qurans that have been defiled? What is he talking about when he says the beauty of the Quran itself is different than the beauty or the miracles of the different prophets in the different books?
It's an opinion. Beauty is beauty is interpreted by what's the saying? It's in the eye of the beholder, right? So it's all that's what he thinks. Somebody else could look at it and think it's shit.
It's a subjective value judgment.
Right. It's an opinion. Like I like vanilla ice cream. It's just an opinion.
Because what essentially Islam is doing is it's basically being very communist here, very 1984. You must have the same opinion as us that the Quran is beautiful. Because look at how beautiful it is.
Jin Wallis seems to have dropped. Jen Wallis seems to have dropped out.
Jen, you can jump back in. I'll add you in. Oh, perfect. Yes, I've seen a few of your debunking of Ali Dawah, and I would love to have you on if there at any point with this StreamYard link if you have any points on any one of these views. All right. Oh, Jin's back. Oh, we can see you. Let's not dox ourselves.
Hey. Oh, that's fine.
Hey.
I've been on camera before. Sorry, I hit the button by accident. Sorry.
For sure. Yeah.
I always tape over my webcam. So even if I manage to click on start cam, if I haven't taken away the tape, no one will see me.
Oh, Yeah, I don't care. I've been on camera before.
Yeah. For
Do
one,
I'm also the kind of type of guy that has VPNs, uses Tor browser, and have a lot of other things as well.
oh no, I got certain death threats for previous things that I did, but at that point I just told them I've been taking antidepressants for 3 years. If you can kill me, I'll give you a trophy. And then that kind of like edgelord kind of means you to push people away.
Yeah, like
I
this
had
is
one.
America. Like, come see me. I don't care.
Yeah, I just there was another guy. Moose was sitting in the room, and I thought he was gonna have an asthma attack when he heard me say this. But some guy was like, "Yo, I'm gonna kill you." I put it on speakerphone. And I'm like, "Say it again." He was like, "I'm gonna stab you." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll stand butt naked outside of my house. I'll give you my address. If I have any clots on me, it's gonna be protection from the knife, so I won't even have that. You can come and stab me." And this guy like ended the call and never like called me back. So like sometimes you just gotta deal with because I deal with it like that. I don't care if my camera shows up on thing.
Yeah.
In any case, I think we got like yeah, I see the chapters here, so we got the next question about the miracles of the Quran, which is something I really want to debunk, especially considering he said the Quran is full of holes with the miracle.
You told us that there are miracles of the Quran.
Yeah.
Can you please just tell us one miracle of Quran?
I'm going to be generous here. I'm going to give you 3. Yeah? Yeah, you have to be generous sometimes in life, you know. The first one is, I think, very profound and very important, because what we are told, for example, that in Surah Balad, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about Abu Lahab.
I like how they have to correct him here.
And this is very interesting, because Abu Lahab could make one statement and the whole of Islam will fall on the ground. Allah says in the Quran about Abu Lahab and his wife that they are going to enter the fire, hellfire. They're going to die as disbelievers and enter the hellfire. Now, if you think about it, Abu Lahab, he had to do one thing and disprove Islam, because the Quran clears you're going to go hellfire, you and your wife, and you're going to die as a disbeliever. So the thing is this, they could have gone, Abu Lahab could have said, hold on a second, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. There you go. Your religion is false. Because your religion says I'm going hellfire. Your religion says I'm going to die as a disbeliever. I accept Islam. He didn't do it. He died as a disbeliever. To me, that is profound, because he had to do one statement to disprove the whole of, they wanted to stop Prophet Muhammad, yeah, with everything. He just had to do 10 seconds of the Shahada and crumble the whole religion. He didn't.
So, might I interrupt? There are several issues here. Firstly, this is a tradition that is within the Quran and could have been created intentionally to, demonstrate the truth of Quran post hoc, after the fact, in that this event or series of events might have never happened, but could have been created afterwards. But if we accept that they happened, there are 2 scenarios as to why, 2 reasons here as to 2 problems as to why Abu Lahab would not say the Shahada. Firstly, saying the Shahada like that would have, by implication, have made him accept Islam, and that would have, also made him, accept the authority of Muhammad, who in this context should be seen as an aspiring religious political leader that wants to get authority, wants to bring people under him, under his religion, to gain more authority for himself or for his religion or whatever. And thus, it would have undermined his own independence and his own allegiances. 2, considering that this was the Arabic Peninsula in a context where we do know that the pre-Islamic Arabs, from what little we do know of pre-Abrahamic religion on the Arabic Peninsula, mainly from Yemen, but also some examples from further up north of the Hijaz, in the Jordan region and the northern Hijaz region, is that we do, and we also have similar examples from the east coast of the Arabic Peninsula as well. From what we do know about religion in these places and from archaeology, is that religion was tightly connected to matters of politics, the political power, the laws of society, and just like Islam later also, is with the Sharia was the basis for a lot of law. and roles of society and power in the Middle East. It was like that also before. So saying that you now believe this new religion could potentially make yourself an apostate in a situation where you would be punished for it, either through outright political persecution, as we do know happened in certain cases in southern Arabia, in their polytheistic societies, and also in their later Abrahamic, converted societies, because the Himyarites converted to Judaism, and then also the people of Yemen converted. Some people of Yemen also converted to Christianity, and also persecuted people that converted away from Christianity. So, in this situation where religions are not tolerant, declaring that you are now declaring the statement of faith of another religion would be considered apostasy, possibly, and you could get punished for it. So you have that reason too as to why not doing it.
Yeah. I was just gonna say that he might be an edgelord just like me. So
Number
No
two,
comment.
there is an evidence, for example, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Quran about the time of Moses and the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, yeah? And Allah talks at the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, he calls the ruler a king. At the time of Moses, he calls him a pharaoh. But in the Bible, they call the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, and they call him a pharaoh. And at the time of Moses, they call him a pharaoh. This is
What are they on here? Continue.
It's just a regional title, you dipshit. He's so stupid.
I mean,
I
can we
can't
let him?
stand him.
Can we let him continue? I wonder what happened with.
Nick smashed that play button, bruv. What happened?
I don't know. Nick might have. I hope he hasn't. Oh, he dropped out.
Oh,
God, that was
heck.
bad. Because he has the administrative rights to StreamYard
Yeah,
right now. I can't actually show this video on StreamYard.
yeah,
So,
that's fine.
But I mean, it depends upon what his argument is going to be following here. But the thing that
Here he's back.
Nick, are you back?
Shayateen.
Hello? Are you back? No, it seems like still
Shaitan has returned, mashallah.
Maybe, but it still seems that he has issues.
can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yeah. Sorry, my laptop froze there. For some reason, I had to restart it.
All right.
It must be the jinns. It's the jinns of the spirit.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's continue seeing some.
Yeah.
They call the time of Yusuf alayhi salam, and they call him a pharaoh. And at the time of Moses, they call him a pharaoh. This is historical error. Because when they deciphered the Rosetta Stone, it's a thing, to understand the Egyptian hieroglyphics, they found out that there was no pharaohs at the time of Joseph. This dynasty didn't exist. There was kings. How did the Quran know this? And they say the Quran copies the Bible. The Quran copied from the Bible. Why didn't the Quran copy the mistake? And how did it know that at the time of Joseph, the ruler is a king? There's no pharaohs. How did they know that? That's number two. Number three, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Rum, Rum. The Romans have been defeated. The historians say the way...
Might I add here?
The Persians...
I mean, firstly, I'm no expert on Egyptian history, so take this with a grain of salt. But, I mean, it could just be a reference that, the pharaoh title might have actually existed back then, but they are called something else. or also the matter, even if it was the case that the Quran saying king at one place and pharaoh at another could also just be a matter of the Quran using different words to describe the same thing. And it isn't intentional, it just happened to coincide with this matter as well. Because, I mean, I'm not certain, but I've seen in, for example, Islamic traditions, the rulers of Rome, of the Roman Empire being described as kings, and they weren't kings; they were emperors, and that was actually a distinction that was pretty important for the Eastern Romans themselves, because they did, go back in their legacy, in their argumentations about legitimacy, to the Roman Republic and not being kings. I actually made a video about this entire matter about 2 years ago. So this is actually a pretty important distinction, and sometimes you just use terms that aren't really applicable, and this is both for the Bible or for the Quran, in that you just throw out terms describing matters. All right, with closely meaning words, even if they aren't 100% correct.
I was gonna say, because a lot of these terms might just be interchangeable, and it depends on the writer what he wanted to use at that time.
I mean, I wouldn't call them interchangeable, but I would say that if the pharaoh title wasn't existent before that, or during the time of supposedly the time Yusuf was around, and also we don't actually know the time of Yusuf. I mean, the Bible isn't very specific when it comes to time,
Facts.
and neither
It's
is
just a regional, I think it's more of just like a regional kind of title for their leader. So there would have been maybe kings in Egypt and pharaohs of Egypt in different regions. I think that there was high priests and priestesses and different terminologies for different regional leaders that they probably didn't use in the desert. They probably used something different. And then, like, what's the Arabic word for king? What do they call their leader? Did they even have kings? It's all just like, it's happenstance and like trying to piece convenient pieces like together and make it into something miraculous when it's just I don't know, lackluster, I guess.
But I mean, there are actually certain important distinctions between titles here. I actually read through an article, but this was about pre-Islamic history, about Assyrian history, in fact. So more than 1,000 years before the time of Muhammad. And there was an actually very important discussion about the importance of the title of Ishiok, steward or representative of Ashur, rather than the other title, which was Shar, which was king. And they made a great distinction between these titles, and these things were important regarding the power of the ruler of the Assyrian Empire. Because the use of these titles implied relationships to the priesthood and subordination to a higher divine law that was given by Ashur, the chief deity in that context. So titles are sometimes important, but sometimes you also, if you are coming from the outside, you just use various descriptions even if they aren't really fitting. So there is that matter also too here. But I just wanted to say that titles are actually important in certain cases. And this is why I mentioned that But sometimes it needs also to be considered that titles are sometimes just used interchangeably, even if they shouldn't be.
Yeah, let's hear what his third miracle is here.
It's impossible to think, let alone them coming back to win, for them to even exist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, the Romans have been defeated, but they are going to win. That's a big statement. That's like saying you guys together, we're going to take over USA and we're going to beat Trump. It's crazy. It's a big gamble. And after 3 to 7 years or 3 to 9 years, the Romans come and defeat the Persians. These are historical problems. And these are just some. There are hundreds.
No,
Hundreds. I'm giving you just 3.
Sorry. This wasn't a big. This wasn't a big prediction, considering that sure the Persians had defeated the Romans several times here in several battles, but the Roman Empire was still pretty powerful, and also even with the defeats that the Romans suffered against the Persians also had issues with the fact they also lost troops in those battles and were pretty exhausted themselves in these Persian-Roman wars. So the Romans coming back and eventually defeating them until, and then their invasions comes and finishes off both that have been exhausted from these back and forth. Isn't that surprising? Also, when you consider that these two powers have historically been the near peers of the region, the two great powers fighting against each other.
Yeah.
This isn't that surprising either. So this isn't a miracle.
You believe in God. So scientists couldn't figure it out, but you could. Is that right?
It's not about I could. We use our logic. We use our brain. The science deals with the 5 senses.
You haven't used logic in a coherent way right now during this video. But let's continue.
What you can see, empiricism. So what we say is very simple. There are scientists who believe in things. If you're talking about, for example, I don't see God, that's why, I don't believe in it. It's not something, science doesn't talk about the supernatural. It stops the physical. But we know, for example, scientists have discovered recently dark matter. Dark matter is something they cannot see, they cannot touch, they cannot feel, they cannot smell, they cannot hear. So the same thing with God. Can you see God? No. Can you touch God? No. Can you smell God? No. Can you hear God? No.
Stop. The very thing with dark matter is that it exerts a gravitational force. You can actually observe its effects. So it's observable in that regard. It is not like God in that sense. You can actually measure it. And, place theories about its effects. Sure, you cannot see it and you cannot observe it directly, but you can observe it indirectly.
I was going to say the exact same thing. God is not something we can physically measure, but we can we are able to measure the dark matter is what I was going to say to this exact point here.
Yes.
Can you see God? No. But you reject He exists. But the same thing with dark matter, same thing, but you say no, dark matter exists. What kind of contradiction is this? First, God doesn't exist because I can't sense, touch, feel, but dark matter, contradiction. Why do you have double standards? This is the issue. As a scientist, it's not something I discovered new. I use my logical reasoning and rationality to come to simple conclusions. And I don't need to be a scientist. I don't care how much big of a scientist you are. There were people who believed in God that were scientists. Like Einstein. He did believe in a higher power. So this issue of science or scientists and God is not contradictory. You can have scientists who are Muslim or scientists who are Christian. So yeah, it's not a discovery.
Are you brave enough to talk with famous atheists? What would you do if you encounter them?
I have no problem. Because to be honest, I don't care what atheist you are, how scientists, professor, I don't care. The same thing applies. I bring my same arguments and you have to answer them. I don't care because what I'm on, I know, I'm 100% so sure, logically, rationally, that there is no way you can get out of it except that you accepting being a deist, minimum deist. Maybe theist we can work on, theism. So I don't care if you're a professor, I don't care, it's irrelevant. As long as you have aql, I hope so, we can reason, then 100% there is no way they can go.
I would so very much want to sit down with Ali Dawah.
Ali Dawah,
With
you ever wanna come on.
certain precautions, though.
yeah, we'll have a list.
I would want something to ensure that it does not, result in a dangerous situation for me.
That Ali Dawah can't guarantee.
If there is
we could
infinite time,
we could do it online as well.
Yeah, we can do it on Modern Day Debates or something, a third-party platform. If he feels that I'm going to be biased, but yeah, you can have a third-party platform.
why not infinite possibilities?
It's a good question. I have to drink my water to answer this. This glass is empty. Yes? Empty. If we said infinite time, because the argument here is you give it infinite amount of time, anything can happen. This is a fallacy. Because to make the properties, argument's sake, if I like a chocolate cheesecake, not chocolate cheesecake, let's talk Turkish, yeah? A nice sütlaç, yeah? If I want to have a sütlaç in here, and I say, let's give it infinite time, would I ever get a sütlaç? And by the way, I like my sütlaç burnt on the top. Let's be specific. Would we ever get it? No, because
this isn't actually the argument. The thing is that as long as there is a chance of possibility and infinite time doesn't make the impossible possible. It just makes the very unlikely likely. The thing that is almost infinitesimally small, unlikely, likely if you take it into infinity. It does not make something that never could happen, that there is no chance of happening, to happen. There must still be a chance, even if almost infinitesimally small, that it can happen in order for that sort of argumentation to actually be coherent. So he's straw manning an argument here. But
equation of time is irrelevant. If the components to make a sütlaç, the way I like it, is not in there, you will never get a sütlaç. It's as simple as that. Time is irrelevant. What's time got to do with it? Let's give it infinite amounts of time. Would you get Ferrari? No. Give it infinite time. Would we get a universe? No. Because the properties to make a universe or a Ferrari or my sütlaç, which is more important, is not in there. So if it's not in there, you will never get it. But hopefully after this, I will get a sütlaç. Okay.
Our questions are complete.
Yes. Once again, he's, straw manning the argument about possibilities. I mean, the entire matter of this, argumentation that he does here is kind of like he's saying, oh, if anything is possible. No, the argument of infinite time creating the universe isn't that anything is possible. It's the argument rather that there exists probably some sort of rule out there that makes a generation of a universe where we can live in possible. It could be almost non-existent, but as long as you give it infinite amount of chances, which if you go into a series of infinity, you would eventually get our universe.
Yeah, no, because I think the infinite time argument comes from the infinite.
We do know that our universe is a possibility, since our universe exists. We actually have confirmation that our existence is an existence. So it's a possibility. We don't know how likely it is, but we do know that our universe is a possibility. But regardless of likelihood, if you got an infinite amount of chances to create this universe. Eventually, if you give it in an infinite amount of attempts at it, you would eventually get our universe. Hello, the Judah Bides, by the way. Nice seeing you in the chat.
Hello, Dude Abides. So I actually have to end the stream early today just because I have work later or a shift today. But Moose wasn't free to do the show, so I had to step in. But yeah, for me, closing thoughts, like most of the arguments that I had, I think Culture Ginny was able to articulate a lot better than me. But in terms of, he made a lot of straw men fallacies on what the actual arguments that atheists would have.
Yeah, the
And
only thing I was a little bit unsure about was when he began to speak about Egyptian history, if they had some sort of other title. But that could just as likely have been just a funny coincidence,
yeah,
I feel. But I don't even know if what he stated there was true, considering everything else that he stated that was either a straw man or just straight out wrong
he
about
also
various
made a
things.
mistake on that as well that they had to correct. So, but in any
Yeah,
case,
but
thank you.
that was before on the Abu Lahab
Oh, yeah,
argumentation. In that one, I could actually argue against him because we do know the contextual factors which would make it so that Abu Lahab would not say the Shahada due to various reasons.
for sure. So, on that note, like I mentioned, I got work that I got to get to. But thank you so much for your help here, Culture Jenny.
Always a pleasure to help.
All right, take care, everyone. See you all next week.
See you. By the way,